First of all, my name is Abby Edgecombe. I am the SCIP coordinator for Lincoln Lancaster County. If you're not familiar with SCIP, we stand for School Community Intervention and Prevention. These community awareness events are just a piece of what we do with our schools to try to get information out to our parents, our educators, to our students on important topics that are impacting the lives of our youth. And so we have invited Dr. Melissa Lafferty here today. And Dr. Lafferty is with Nebraska Mental Health Centers. That is one of our partnering SCIP agencies. So if you're not as familiar, we do partner with behavioral health agencies who can offer free mental health or substance use evaluations to our students if they need just some further assessment and some connection to services. So Nebraska Mental Health Centers has been a really great partner, and Dr. Melissa Lafferty has provided us with lots of different presentations and education, but she's going to talk to us today specifically about social media, the good, the bad, the ugly, a little bit of all of it. But primarily she's going to talk about some of the impacts that it can have on our youth mental health, but also really that importance of that distinction between our real life connections and those connections that we all have, not just our youth, on social media. So with that, I'm going to let Dr. Lafferty tell you a little bit more about her background and her experience and get going. And I know that she encourages feedback and conversation, so please participate as you see fit.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, can everyone hear me okay? Fantastic. Okay, so like Abby said, I'm Dr. Melissa Lafferty. I'm a clinical psychologist at Nebraska Mental Health Centers. We are a generalist practice, so we see literally any age, any diagnoses that walks in through the door. So I kind of have a little bit of a specialty in working with kids and families and youth. I have a background as a parent-child interaction therapist, and I'm certified in that and do training within the agency for that as well. So kids and families and adolescents, they're kind of my jam. So I really enjoy being asked to do these types of presentations because we get to kind of look at all those different levels of like, how does it affect us, but also how does it affect our kids and our families? So I am a very interactive speaker. I do have a lot of like open-ended things that we're going to be talking about as we go through the presentation. So please don't be shy. I want the dialogue, okay? So unplugged, social media. So I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that social media is terrible. It's not, right? Like there are good things about social media. So we're going to kind of talk about a lot of different things today. So we're going to start by talking about kind of what are both of those positive and negative pieces of social media. So how does it benefit us? But then what are some things that maybe do kind of get in the way of social media being helpful in our lives? We're going to talk a little bit about like the addiction cycle and how social media has, for some, unfortunately turned into an addiction. And what can we do about that? Kind of what are the consequences of that and how we connect with ourselves and others, both online but also in our life. And then finally, we're going to talk about a few strategies that parents could put into place to maybe help monitor, help have those conversations with our adolescents and youth on how to better manage social media. Okay? All right, so social media. Do we recognize all those apps for the most part? Yeses, nos, a little bit. Okay, so I kind of picked just some of our more popular ones. So we have like Facebook, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Skype, Google+. The WhatsApp app and Dribble are the ones that are kind of on the screen for you, but there's a lot more, right? Like this is just a snippet of some of the apps that we see on social media, okay? So when you think about your phone and kind of what social media is on it, would you say that these are common? Like most of us have probably some of these? What about our teens? So you don't have some of them?
I don't have any of them.
What? That's amazing. And surprising, I'm not gonna lie. I think my 9-year-old has some of these. So they are fairly common though for most of our youth. So what we have found research-wise is that about 95% of adolescents ages 13 to 18 have access to smartphones. On those smartphones, often the purpose is what? To connect to social media. Like, that's the point behind them, okay? In 2018, 45% of adolescents reported that they were online almost constantly. And that was up 24% from 3 years prior. So when we think of just from 2018 to 2015, how much that has grown, that's huge. Again, that statistic is probably even more now, so it's a little dated. But as of 2020, some of the most popular social media apps for those adolescents 13 to 18 were YouTube. 85% reported they had that. 72% reported they had Instagram. 69% Snapchat. 51% Facebook. So a growing trend in 2020 that's probably much bigger now that it's 2022 is what? TikTok. So TikTok is kind of the next growing app. As of 2022, so kind of this statistic was taken right towards the beginning of, or towards the middle of last year. TikTok has over 3 billion downloads and 100 billion active users each month. So it's a lot. Are those all adolescents? No, probably not, but it definitely is a growing trend among our adolescents. So when we think about social media, what do you think the original purpose of social media was or is? Connection. Perfect, yeah. It definitely was designed, a lot of the apps were designed for connection. So I think about Facebook, like, I'm gonna date myself, but I was around when Facebook like became a thing. And that was the big thing about it, is like, look, I can talk to so-and-so who now lives over here and I live still in Nebraska. So I think the purpose is really for connection. Do we gain that from social media? You can't, okay, how? How do we feel like we do gain that now? But that's true, like we have messaging, almost all of those platforms have some type of a messaging component to it. Did I see someone over here? Yes, go ahead. Right, exactly, so it has opened this whole world of information. Is some of that information concerning? Yes, but still some of it is factual, and it helps us connect to other parts of the world, helps us learn about other things that are happening kind of beyond just our little community, right, that we live in. So we definitely do gain things from social media. So thinking about some of the positives of social media. So yeah, number one, social connection. So 81% of teenagers report that social media allows them to feel more connected to their friends and what their friends are doing. In a study in 2018, 77% of adolescents reported that social media was at least somewhat important for keeping up on day-to-day lives of their friends, okay? And 69% reported that it was helpful in creating meaningful conversations and connections with their friends. So that's a pretty good statistic, right? 69%, 77% are saying, yeah, that was helpful. I could have a helpful conversation with my peer online, okay? We use it for humor and entertainment, right? Like my Instagram is full of just funny videos and things that make me laugh to start my day. So we definitely can use it to connect to those various feel-good stories and enjoyment that we might not be able to get, again, just inside like our central community and where we're located, right? So there are definitely positives there. Identity exploration is another one. So many have found it meaningful, again, to connect to other cultures, other communities, other supports that are not found inside their community. So I work in a lot of rural Nebraska places. There's not a lot of supports out there for youth of a different culture or a different sexual identity. Like, there's not a lot of supports, right? So finding that online can actually be really helpful for some of those youth to realize, I'm not alone. There are other people like me. Here are the things and other resources I can get to. So that can be really huge for some of our individuals who are maybe stuck in some of those more rural settings. And then finally, creative expressions. So we see all kinds of things on there that maybe we wouldn't have seen before, right? Art, music, stories. You can post anything online. So there are a lot of benefits. So can you guys think of anything else that I did not add to the list that you feel like, yeah, this is a positive, this is what I get from social media?
You can check what's going on in this country, that country, next door, and a lot of people, that's their only source of news.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. I watch a lot of news things on social media. What else?
Except for a lot of scheduling things.
What do you mean?
Like Facebook always has like events that are happening in your community.
True.
Things that maybe would be interesting.
Yeah, that's a huge one I didn't even think about, but that's a really great point. Like, half the time I don't even know what's going on until I see an event you might be interested in. And I'm like, actually, yes, thank you. So yeah, that's a really good one too. Yep.
Kind of goes with some of the things that are out there, but just awareness, social connections and news and other things, but just awareness of like philanthropic activities that might be going on, or I've seen a lot more with suicide awareness, or
Right.
positive things that are good for us to learn about that are highlighted in some of your feed.
Yep, absolutely. So now let's chat a little bit about the negatives. So some of the things that have come up the most, again, that affect youth, not that they don't affect adults too, but affect youth, are kind of these four on here, okay? So cyber victimization. So essentially that is just the experience of being bullied online, right? So obviously, if we're being bullied online, what does that usually lead to for most individuals?
Depression.
Right, exactly. So huge spike in depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. So that has been a big concern so again, this is where research is interesting, because I'm not going to say it causes it, but there is a correlation in studies of mental health problems or concerns of youth going up since the rise of social media has really increased since 2018. So one example is that from between 2007 and 2017, suicide rates among youth, so 10 to 24 was the age range, increased 56%. So that's huge. Yeah, exactly. Like, wow, that is huge in 10 years. And it's stayed consistently high. So it really has not dropped down. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among teenagers. So it's a concern. These definitely correlate with each other. Both have happened at the same time. We've increased social media use, and now we're seeing an increase in mental health concerns. So definitely a concern there. Social comparison. So social comparison, I think, on social media it hits us all, right? Like, how many of you get on your social media and are like, man, so-and-so's doing all of these cool things? Like, we've probably all done that at one point or another. So that is a big concern, not only for all of us, but also for our youth. Why is it a bigger concern for our youth than maybe adults? To have that social comparison kind of there, more obvious, probably.
They're maybe just not quite much, like, to handle, like, how to deal with that. Like, as an adult, you might think on it for a few minutes, but be able to move on to whatever
Right. Yep, perfect. That's a perfect explanation. They just kind of get stuck there. And some of that is natural development of kids. That's kind of where their brain is. What's so-and-so doing compared to what I'm doing? That's a natural developmental step for children in adolescence and young adulthood. So they get caught in that trap, I think, a lot more than, yes, we as adults do, because we can kind of say, like, okay, we can remember, like, oh, that's a picture. What happened behind that picture? What happened before that picture? Like, we can kind of recognize, like, there were probably some things, like, that's a little bit cookie cutter, looks beautiful, but there were probably some things that were kind of messy about it. And our adolescents just have a harder time kind of reasoning that out in their head. The last one, and this for me, like as a parent, is a big one, is sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene has really gone not so great, has trended downward for youth and adolescents. So when we think about sleep hygiene, do we know how much sleep teens should be getting? Yep, essentially. So our kids that are about 6 to 12 should be getting 9 to 12 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. And then 13 to 18 should be getting 8 to 10. So when we think about that, what happened? We all know this happens. So what happens if we're looking at our phones or a computer or a tablet or TV right before bedtime? Yeah, like, first of all, it keeps our brain going, right? But secondly, it disrupts that natural circadian rhythm of helping our body go to sleep. So there's been a huge increase in poor sleep quality, difficulty sleeping, and just really daytime tiredness and fatigue has increased a lot among our adolescents. It's reported that about 40% of adolescents use some type of a device 5 minutes before bedtime. And 36% report that they wake up in the middle of the night to check their devices, at least once. So when I saw that one, I was like, that's a lot. I don't know. I just can't imagine waking up and being like, what notifications did I miss? But that's kind of the concern, is when we think about these negative things and the positive, like, what is social media like giving us? Why are kids waking up in the middle of the night to check their notifications?
I think for some it's a habit.
Yes, absolutely. So it's a habit.
Affirmation of type of how many likes did I get on a post?
Yes, exactly. So a lot of it comes to like that addiction piece. So when we think about addiction, like when I say that word, I guess what do you all think? Yep, something that we have to keep doing, because why? What if I don't do it?
Feel bad.
Yeah, I might feel bad, I might feel sad. It's not giving me like any joy, right? If I don't do this thing. The thing is, we can get addicted to a lot of things, right? Food, exercise, even though it's a good one for us, we can still get addicted to it, can still kind of go too far sometimes. And then obviously our normal things I think we think of when we think addiction is substances, gambling, things like that. But now we're starting to see that for many of our youth, that affirmation piece, that, oh, what did somebody say? What did somebody like? I gotta know, is becoming a huge part of this addiction cycle. So kind of when we look at this addiction cycle, and I'm not gonna, that's a whole nother presentation. So we're gonna keep this real brief, but it kind of goes in this little circle here. So there's typically some type of an emotional trigger. So I'm just going to go with food right now to talk about it, because sometimes that's just, it's a neutral one. So let's say we've had like a not so great day and we're feeling kind of down. and I know there's a Dairy Queen right by my work on the way home. So what do I start thinking about if I'm kind of feeling down and not feeling so great? Yes, I'm like, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna get that Blizzard, right? So then we have the craving, okay? Does the craving go away even if I'm still engaging in other tasks at work? Not likely. I mean, it could for some people, but not likely. Usually it kind of intensifies for most people, especially if it is falling into kind of that addiction category. Then there's usually some type of a ritual. So when we say there's some type of a ritual, there's other cues that are going to lead to the engagement in whatever that addiction is. Does that kind of make sense? So if I'm really craving that Blizzard, I know I need to go home this particular way so that I can pass right by the Dairy Queen and then, oh, look, it's super easy. I just float right in there. Whereas if I'm maybe not in that mood, I'm driving home a completely different way. Does that kind of make sense? So then we get into like the consumption, the using of whatever it is. And for that minute, how do we feel? Good. Yeah, we're pretty happy because what has happened to our brain? Right, and it's been flooded with our feel-good chemical of dopamine. So it feels pretty happy. A little ways down the road, we might not feel so happy anymore. So then sometimes this is kind of an extra step, but then sometimes we go into the, okay, so I'm not gonna do that again. That really wasn't worth it. Now my stomach's upset. I don't feel that good, whatever it may be, okay? So I feel like when we think about social media, this same kind of thing can kind of happen. We get into these rituals, these habits of, I gotta check it, this is when I do, every lunch hour I just scroll through Instagram or whatever. It just becomes such a habit and a ritual that we're not stopping to think about, is this helping me? And oftentimes where we get to the end, that guilt piece, many people will put down their phone from social media, and if they really think about it, they don't feel much better most of the time. Like sometimes it might help a little bit, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really feed anything in our soul to make us super happy. So when we're seeing that we're kind of getting stuck in this cycle, in this trap, I think that's something that's really important to then, we need to start having conversations with people. And I will tell you as a psychologist, this is something I've started talking about a lot more with my people than I think I ever have before. And really trying to help them see like what has the algorithm figured out you watch? Because that's not always good content, right? So sometimes we can get stuck in this loop of consuming things that just make us feel even worse about ourselves, and it's not giving us all those positive, feel-good things that it was before. And one thing that's interesting, or that I think we kind of know about social media, is like, all those things are connected to each other, right? So if I'm searching shoes over here, my shoe ads are gonna come start hitting me on Facebook. So if we're searching things about depression or sadness, that's gonna start floating into all those other social media apps. So it's one thing when we get into these kind of rhythms and we have to kind of examine, is this working for me? And what do I do about it? Okay, so when we think about, is this working for me? I have a little video.
I think what resonates with me is the editing of the photographs, and as a parent of 4 teenagers, 2 of them are girls, and we have constant conversations about this at our house, because I'll be very honest, it drives me crazy, watching that unfold, because I think it becomes a very unhealthy habit. When I tell them, back in the day when I took pictures, I had to wait a week to even get them back, so I knew what I looked like. But it as a parent, as a caregiver, it worries me about what that's doing to them and to their perception of, gosh, I have to look perfect to even post something.
Right.
And I'm not opposed to them posting, but I just wish it could be, just post as you are. Post as who you are and how you look naturally, because they're beautiful that way. But I just think it becomes, I worry about self-confidence and what it's doing to our kids.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Her just putting on her makeup to go get back in bed to take a picture. Look like she's in bed, and woke up like this.
Yeah.
Like, hashtag woke up like this. You just spent an hour putting on makeup and brushing your teeth and putting your hair back. Yeah. So it's concerning for sure because, and again, I think as adults, we all know there was a mess behind that perfect photo, right? Like, I think we all can realize that and reason through that, even if we do get caught up in a trap for a minute of that social comparison. But there's so many reasons why our adolescents get caught up. So number one, those growing, developing brains, they are not there yet. They're not quite at that reasoning. That's probably not real. That's probably a little staged, like especially all of the one with the desk with all the little, like all of her little loops perfectly lined up. It's like, okay, but our adolescents don't realize that, right? They're kind of like, oh man, they are super organized. Like, how did that happen? Just again, that social development, social comparison, that is a natural developmental milestone for kids, for all of us. And they just get kind of stuck there. They get stuck in that, oh, my life must not be as good as theirs if they're eating that green smoothie for breakfast, and here I am shoving McDonald's down my mouth. They just get kind of caught up in that a lot. And then really when we think about that development of the frontal lobe, it really controls that inhibition and controls behaviors, and they just kind of can't get out of it. So I'm gonna go backwards just a second, back to this screen. What did you see in the video that kind of reinforces some of this? What happened when those likes would happen? What would happen to people's faces? Smile. Yeah, there was like immediate light up. Like especially, I think the one at the end is probably the most powerful one for me because that was not a good photo. That wasn't a good experience, her and her guy, and he's like, get off me. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna post it anyway, and like, I love my man, and then is super sad, and then ding, 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 all the likes, and we're sitting up and we're just happy. So like that hit of dopamine just keeps people coming back, right? So I feel like that one is probably one of the most like powerful ones in the whole video, but they're everywhere in that little snippet. Every time I watch it, I see more. Yeah.
Would you say that video is pretty accurate?
I think I would say so.
Because I don't use social media like that. I don't do the like thing. I don't have that emotional trigger type of thing going on.
That's fine. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have witnessed that in restaurants. Do I think that happens for every group of kids? No, not necessarily, but like I've seen it. I don't know, have you guys all seen? I mean,
a teacher told me that, oh, it's so cute, your son is sitting in my class and next to his girlfriend and they're just texting each other. Like they're not talking, so yeah.
They're right next to each other. Like just say it to them. Like just talk, interact. That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head, but now I'm going to go look it up because that's the kind of person that I am. I would guess though, like, and this has come up too in some research, and again, I don't have any like thing off like this exact study, but I know there's been research done about like social skill development and the concerns of that not being as great as it used to be, because yes, we're engaging through pictures and abbreviated messages and not just having a conversation. So there's definitely research out there, and I know that is a concern. That again, is that a causation? I don't know if the research has proved that, but does it correlate? Do they go together? For sure. Okay, I was like, I don't know what the screen is doing.
I have seen some of that research that, social media, even though it seems like in terms of study-wise, it takes years to develop, some of these really good studies, but some of what I've seen piggybacks on what you've talked about with social skills, particularly things like conflict resolution.
Yes.
So, I think of as adults, my friends maybe have sent me a text message. It's very easy to read between the lines of what that emotion was that was sent via that text message that, they may have not been angry at all, but I might perceive it as, well, it sounds angry in there because they ended it with an exclamation mark. Had we just had that conversation face to face, I might have walked away with a different, variation of what that felt like. Even things, I was at a school this week and a little girl was so upset because her boyfriend broke up with her at 2 a.m. over text messaging. Well, those are things that are hard to sit with because it's so, they're not having those hard conversations face to face like as much as we used to. I'm not saying it's not happening. I just think these devices make it very easy not to have them face to face. I mean, my kids are guilty of it. They'll, I am not a perfect parent, nor are any of us probably, but they, they want to have a hard conversation with me. They'll start with sending me a text message, or if they know I'm going to say no to something, they ask me via text, and I'm like, I'm down here.
Yeah,
right
come on
down. 7th floor. Come on down and look me in the face, and we'll have a
conversation.
conversation. Yeah,
for sure.
I talk to my students about that, and they say it's easier because I can see what I'm going to say,
Yeah.
and if I don't like it, I can delete it and I can fix it. But if I have to have a conversation, I have to come up with the words right there. And that's a skill that is dwindling, and it's not being nourished and developed.
Right, absolutely. And it is hard. It's hard. I can get that too, even from like an anxiety perspective. If I have to have a hard conversation, it's like, I rehearse that stuff. Like, what am I gonna say? But I would agree, it's probably not maybe taught or like displayed as much. I thought somebody else had a thought. Nope. Okay. Yeah.
With the years that they stayed home, it's worse.
Yeah.
So they were so used to just interacting online then too. So now it's like, even those that had good social skills, it's almost a little teaching.
Right. Yeah. I agree 100%. And actually, just as you were saying that, COVID online triggered my brain. Just yesterday, I actually did an entire therapy session with somebody through a chat. Now, part of it was they did not have good privacy in their house, and the features that we have for our telehealth do have a chat feature. So we were able to kind of maintain a little bit more privacy. But at the very end, I said, this is the most you've ever talked to me in therapy. Like, do we need to just text each other during our therapy sessions? Like, and she's like, ha ha ha, maybe. I'm like, okay, no, we're gonna talk about this. But it's neither here nor there for today. But it was something that it was interesting to me because she had never talked as much as we did yesterday. So, little concerning, because it's like we got to be able to have those face-to-face conversations. All right, so cruising right along. So what can we do? So I realize the title of that sounds very dramatic, like stop social media use. Let's just stop maybe excessive social media use. So what are some things that we can do to kind of help support maybe even ourselves or our youth to kind of stop? So the number one thing that anybody will recommend to you is managing screen time. So setting some type of parameters on how many minutes, hours, whatever that may be that they can spend on screen time. So the nice thing about apps and social media and all that is there's lots of fantastic monitoring apps that parents can get. So Bark, I know we have Family Link, which is great. I'm sure there's more out there. I just don't know all the names of them off the top of my head, but there's lots of things that parents can download that are free. So download a different app, but it does help kind of monitor kids' social media use. I know some are even really nice in that you can put in keywords. So if you're concerned about any mental health things, you can put in words like depression, suicide, hurting myself, and it will flag you as the parent if they're texting that, if they're looking that up on any social media outlets. So there are some advantages out there to some of those apps. But it is important to communicate with your teen, why are we setting some screen time limits? We're not just trying to be mean and like bullies. Like there's good reasons for kind of managing some of that screen time. And again, like I just shared with you guys earlier, this is something I'm even talking with my adult clients about. Like, how much TikTok are you watching? And it's like, well, hours, because then the next one will just pop up, and the next one will just pop up, and the next, and they're like, and then 2 hours later, I didn't get my homework done that night. I haven't fed myself. Like, that's a concern. You should not be consuming that much social media that you've like lost all wherewithal of like what time it is and like are ignoring bodily sensations of I'm starving. So it is kind of an issue that, again, it doesn't just affect our youth, it can affect adults as well. But it's definitely something that we really want to try to first tackle that way. One interesting study, though, that was done in 2018 was on a bunch of college students who set some screen times for themselves, limiting their social media consumption to 30 minutes a day, and they found a huge boost in their mood and their well-being. Like they felt better about themselves by reducing their social media use. So I do think that that's really interesting. Going with that managing screen time is like monitoring that use, those apps that can be really helpful in monitoring. I think the other piece too, so I have a budding adolescent at home, and we sat down and had a long conversation of like, fine, you can have Instagram now, I will allow it. You have to follow me, I get to follow you. Like we're not hiding things from each other on these social media sites. So having those conversations of like, we're gonna friend each other. Like you have to have some connection there. And just being able to have that open conversation with kids. Again, kind of encouraging those breaks. So in 2022, they did a study that found taking a 1-week break from social media was enough to improve people's well-being and highly reduce depression and anxiety. So that's huge. And that was on adults, so that wasn't necessarily youth, but still, it definitely is something. I think then kind of going into these last two, like this is where we talk a little bit more about how do we counter some of those mental health concerns. So one thing we know happens on social media, right? Like we see a post, maybe like a teen kind of sees a post, all of her friends have gotten together and she was not invited to that event, right? Like, now that happened to me when I was growing up, but was it like in my face on social media? No, I found out about it, like a few days later at school and was bummed, but it wasn't as out there, right? So one thing that we can really do to kind of help our teens, like with that social comparison, with that mental health piece, is just talk about how can we handle these stressors, or how can we handle something when we are seeing something online that is making us really sad, mad, frustrated, whatever it may be. So developing good coping strategies, good coping mechanisms, even I think sometimes those coping mechanisms like exercise and pro-social activities, you're involved with sports, you're involved with clubs, organizations, so reminding them that, well, yeah, you didn't go to that one thing there, but you saw XYZ this whole day at this event. So reminding them of like, yeah, but you had an in-person connection too. So yeah, you missed out on this little thing, but this also happened over here. So just being able to, I think, foster more of those coping mechanisms of like in-person contact and socialization is really huge too. And then talking about it. So I talk to my kids very openly about times where social media has not made me very happy. And I've taken breaks and have explained why I'm not on social media right now or why I'm not looking at Facebook. Like just having those conversations of every time I open Facebook, I'm feeling a little upset. Like that's not a good way to start my day. So I'm gonna choose to not start my day that way. Can have a huge effect on kids and like a lifelong effect of understanding that it can be kind of controlled. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to live your whole world revolving around these apps because we want to foster those connections in real life and have social connections and have those social skills. So those are some of the big things that most researchers of social media kind of suggest. What about you guys? Have any of you had some of these conversations? Is there anything else maybe you have done that I didn't throw up on the list that you found helpful in talking with your kids or adolescents or students or whatever about social media?
My kiddos, I really try to emphasize gratitude. It's been proven you can't really be stressed if you're feeling thankful.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so just trying to always point out where they get annoyed at me and roll their eyes.
You're like, you're welcome. I like that attitude of gratitude. Mm-hmm. Others?
One thing we've done at our house is, my husband and I have really taken a look at our own. I mean, our kids are a little bit older now, but when they first kind of started getting into this stage of our own use.
Mm-hmm.
And, am I walking around our house talking to my kids and looking at my phone at the same time and learning to put things down and even, unplugging my phone away from my bed at night because, it's, that means more to them, I think, when they can see that I'm following some of these same guidelines as well. Mm-hmm. And that's been helpful for us. And there's been times they call me out on things, and that's okay, right?
Yep.
Just a reminder, you're absolutely right. I am, not present right now, and I do need to work on that. And so that's one thing that was helpful for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know one time my kids called me out. I checked my phone at dinner and we kind of have a don't bring your phone to the dinner table. And I was like, you are absolutely right. And I went and put it away and it was not a pressing issue. So I did not need to be looking at that minute. So yeah, I like that kind of the practice, what you're preaching, modeling it. Yeah, it's a good example.
I think the consequence what we preach and role modeling is that then you are present for kids, and so when they walk into the room, you're going to light up. And they've shown that when you light up when a kid enters the room, they're much more engaged with you and resilient in the long term. And so just those little tiny moments when we're not doing this, and they walk in, or if they walk into the room and it's your personal rule to put that down and be here, then that's going to go a long way in their resiliency path.
Absolutely. And that sets off another level of hormones of oxytocin, which makes us all feel good. So yeah, I think that's a great example of just reminding ourselves to take a second, put it down, make that eye contact, be present. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up, I don't know if you all have seen this movie. It's hilarious if you have not. And it actually is a really good movie to start fostering. helped myself and my kiddos have a really cool conversation about social media. So this movie is Ron's Gone Wrong. So I do highly recommend you all checking it out. So I definitely think these conversations are happening a lot more in households. And I do think that more people are kind of choosing to like not really engage, or if they are, it's very, very minimal. I have not had a teen though in my office that's like, nope, no thank you. But I have had teens that are better about like, this is my therapy time, I'm putting my phone down, and things like that. And I love to see that. And I always really praise it when I do. Like, thank you for being present in the room. Wouldn't that be really rude if I were on my phone too? So just kind of having those conversations, I think, is a nice way to continue to foster that development and just awareness that we don't have to be slaves to our phones.
I think there are more kids that are mindful of this, older teenagers that
Experience some of those negative effects. I know I witnessed one of my daughters and her group of friends were over and they had ordered pizza or something. Anyways, I heard one of them say, okay, everybody put your phones away. And I loved that because I thought, that's great that you guys, that's your goal as a parent, right? Is we can have all these monitoring systems in the world, but someday they have to self-monitor themselves and learn how to navigate it in a way that's healthy for them and not unhealthy. And so I do think continuing in those conversations is helpful for our teens to realize that there's an okay way to do this without causing such detriment.
Yeah. One of my has a friend that does that. She is we're together, there's no phone policy when we're all hanging out as friends. And I love it. She bosses them around and like, put your phone away. Like, you go, girl.
when they do that, they engage in great conversation.
They do. Yeah.
Which is, that's what you want.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question. What we see from the kind of research is that most kids will have some type of social media even by the age of like 9. So it can start quite young.
I don't know if I was watching something or reading something and it was that the age of social media and kid use is getting younger and younger, but there's no instruction. It's yes, you can have it. And more of if that's allowed, it's that instruction piece that sometimes we don't know how to instruct them. And they're asking kids, how did you learn? Well, my friends and people already had it, and so good or bad, they're self-learning.
Right, exactly. I think I saw your hand up.
They're all staring at their phones, but
It does, for sure. Now, I didn't say this in my intro, but this clinical psychology is actually not my first career. My first career was education, and I taught for 5 years in an inner city school in Houston. And it was a pretty strict no phones, but that varied from class to class. And I will admit I was probably one of the teachers that was lenient in some ways of like, if we're working, if it's work time and you're like, I have to have my music or I'm not gonna be quiet and work, fine, put in an earbud, listen to your music, like just get your work done. So, but I would always tell them, if an administrator walks into my room, you rip that earbud out of your as fast as you can. But yeah, if like I saw it during tests or things like that, like, yep, your phone is mine now. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. But I would say, I think most schools try to really limit it. But it is a lot of work though, to like be monitoring every single one. There's a lot of things to monitor during that school day.
Is there a source that adults can go to kind of get ahead of like, maybe what's the trend in your geography now?
I actually might turn that to Abby, because you do a good job of monitoring all of that type of stuff. Do you know of anything?
I don't. Constant research.
Yeah. I wish. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. And I think that's what's hard is like I feel like on every social media website, there's going to be accurate, good information, useful, and there's going to be like, what is happening? That is not true at all. And so that's what we were just talking about TikTok actually before we all started tonight. And I think that's a huge one. Like, I'm seeing a massive trend of everybody coming in knowing they have this mental health diagnosis because they saw it on TikTok, so it must be true. And I'm like, no, you don't. And as much as there's that on TikTok, I also know that there are psychologists and doctors and other people that are providing accurate information on TikTok. So it's hard because I don't think it's just a clear cut, like, this is giving accurate information and this one's not. I think there's, unfortunately, yeah.
And the fact that some, like with TikTok, it can make them do such stupid things.
Right.
Like in all of the TikTok challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they should know that that's not okay.
Probably not a good move, yeah.
But then they see, oh, they're all doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do it too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really troublesome.
And I think sometimes in the aftermath is not that's what's not posted. You know, it's like, oh, I'm doing this, but then I'm not going to post what happened to me after I ate that Tide Pod or whatever it was there for a while. But I think that's a big piece of it. So then, yeah, they're just seeing that one piece. So again, kind of that Insta life, like they're just seeing this when really there's all this other stuff behind it. So that's what can be a little alarming. Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, I think I would say so. I mean, even if we get into college age, we can still be bamboozled on some of those things. So I think it's about having those conversations of like, how do you pick up on those red flags? Or like, this feels weird. Like, maybe I shouldn't continue to talk to somebody about this. But I mean, again, in a conversation with like a 40-something-year-old woman who's putting herself back out there dating, she was kind of getting caught up in a conversation of someone who was scamming, for money. And she's like, wait a second, hold on. This is not feeling right. But that was after several conversations. So again, I don't think it's ever just, oh, I know I'm being tricked here. So I think it's having that open conversation, teaching your kids what to look for, teaching your young adult children what to look for, and just kind of having those conversations of, okay, this is a red flag, like right here, this is concerning. So it's hard. All right, well, I will hang out for a few more minutes if anybody else has any questions. I really appreciate you guys all braving roads and not so good weather. We were nervous. We were gonna have people, so thank you so much for coming out tonight. If you have any questions, I'll be hanging out. Thank you. Thank you.